So today we're going to uh, talk about a little bit about ourselves and why we wrote the book, and then we're going to talk about three main things in terms of stewarding the atmosphere, and that is stewarding your team, stewarding your gear, stewarding your atmosphere, and all throughout this time, we're going to have like live Q&A. So this is not pre-recorded. We're right here, and we would love for anyone who would like to chime in to be able to interact, to talk with us. We don't really want this to be like about me, about Tim, about the book as much as like how we can work together and help you. Maybe there's
Yeah.
some things that are pressing needs at your church, or maybe there's just things we can chat about, and we would love to do that and interact. So, sound good to everybody? This book is a 400-page, very comprehensive guide to lighting and video and how that can change and affect an atmosphere in your church. That doesn't mean, Tim, that audio is not important. Obviously, audio is a really big component of that. So, for all the audio folks watching, we love you. Very important things. That actually has a huge effect on the atmosphere. However, with the book that we've written in our particular area of expertise, it really centers around video and lighting for video. We're going to talk about just a little bit of that tonight. So, we're going to start with the age old question. Whenever I talk to people, about this book, the question is, what is an atmosphere? What is the atmosphere that we're stewarding? And so, like many of you, Tim and I like to go to coffee shops. It's one of our favorite things to do. And I have two pictures of two different coffee shops here. The one on the left, Tim, I would describe this one as being pretty dingy and dark and kind of hard to read the menu. Not
I
super
think I've been in
inviting.
that one before. I think I've been there before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we've all experienced something like this. Now, this may be let's say, like an AI replica of what I might experience of like a coffee shop in a gas station. Sometimes it's not the most pleasant thing. That you got some smells going on. You've got some maybe not as easy to read and see things, but that's really what I get from that. Recently, I was at a coffee shop just like this. Tim, we talked about this before, where it was just like this. It was really hard to see the menu. It was dark, and it
Mhm.
wasn't like a moody kind of dark. It was just not a fun, pleasant dark. And the coffee was amazing, but it was just such an unpleasant atmosphere, like around, like the
Mhm.
mood music wasn't really jiving. It was kind of more like heavy metal, and it's just like I can't really get any studying done. Wouldn't really want to meet anyone here. Didn't sound so great. But then the next time I went to a coffee shop, I went to the one that looks like the one in this picture, where there was pleasant lighting, the decor was nice, smelled good. You could smell the baked goods and the coffee was kind of mediocre, I'm not gonna lie. But there's one of these atmospheres that I would go to over the other, and it's that one. So I think, and Tim, you're drinking coffee right now. It looks like you're in Starbucks. So tell us how the atmosphere is there.
It's pretty wonderful. It actually is Starbucks coffee, and my wife just taught me off. So I'm happy.
Oh, that's
Happy guy.
well, when you have coffee, that's a good thing. So that's what like an atmosphere is, and this is the atmosphere that we get to steward as technicians, as people that are serving in the church. It's that one small space between the congregation and the worship leader or the pastor. Thankfully for me, I've never been the type to want to have a sermon or lead worship in front of a huge congregation. That's a really special calling, and they've worked really hard to prepare that over the week. And when the weekend service comes or whatever the event is, they've prepared that, and then everyone else is coming in the building, carrying in things from the week. Personally, and I have 5 kids, and so on the way to church, it is never like oh, hey everybody, let's get in the car and go to church and everything's pleasant and perfect. I mean, there's fights, there's boogers, there's shoes that get left at home, have to turn around and get and like it's very easy to come into church tense, and then once you're in there, I don't just suddenly feel like, oh, now I'm ready to worship the Lord. It's one of those things where it feels like this, I need to like kind of shift gears. And that is the atmosphere that you, as a tech leader or a lighting person,
Mhm.
audio person, video person, get to steward, because ministry is going for it. And I heard a pastor say this one time, and he said it's like you get to, as a minister, the tech minister, you get to like hold the hand of what the worship leaders are doing and the sermon pastor is doing, and connect that with the hand of the congregation. Like you are that. and that's the atmosphere we steward.
So many that will see this or whatever, even come across our book, when you hear the word stewarding the atmosphere,
Yeah.
some people get it immediately, they understand what it is, and some people are going to go, what do you mean steward the atmosphere? And I think what we do in the tech world can be misunderstood by so many. The heart behind stewarding the atmosphere, and the heart behind, I believe, everybody that sees this or will see this, is to create an atmosphere where people can encounter God. And that's really what we do. The two key things is we want to be not seen. That's why we normally wear dark. That's why we do all the things that we do. We want it to be as distraction free as possible so that people can make that connection with God. Everything that we do in tech to be distraction free is the goal of what we want to do so that we can get out of the way and people can encounter God.
Before we get really going, though, I a lot of times, when these we'll do social media, we'll do emails, and sometimes it's really impersonal. So we just wanted to share very briefly just a little bit about us, so that you can know that yes, we are human. We are not AI created, and nor was the book. Sometimes I wonder about Tim. He's really smart, so I would think, is this AI or is this just me? So just briefly about me, I started in production as a theater character. It's about 20 years ago. Went into production. It was like a mini like local theater, youth theater, and I was actually Tinkerbell in my first production.
You're quite
Now,
a character,
yeah, I
Brandon.
was quite a character. Now, I don't want
Yeah,
it that to sound weird because it was a spotlight. It wasn't me dressed up in a little outfit. That would never happen. But
we
that's where
need
I
pictures.
Exactly. That's where I found my love for live production. Started with lights, moved to audio, and then eventually video. But got to do that. I spent 5 years in corporate video work, where in the town I was in, and learned a lot about like how video can actually have a huge impact on people because you're tying together like audio and lighting and like creating something super emotional that people can connect to. So after that, went to film school in Los Angeles. That was an amazing time. Also realized I couldn't afford life out there. So after I went to film school, went to Texas, moved to Texas, and started volunteering at the church, Gateway Church, and accidentally, over the course of a few years, became the director of video at the church, overseeing 10 campuses and the video directors, like the creative side of things, as well as some of the gear and things like that. So that was an amazing experience that pulled me out of that studio version of video into the live production. And I really fell in love, and also was able to from that develop the companies that you guys have seen, Directing Academy, and then work on this book with one of my best friends here, Tim Sawtelle. We've worked on this book for a long time. It's really been a special, labor of love for us to create this. And during all that time, created 5 children with my wife. You can see here, they're definitely the most amazing thing to me in this world. So I love that, and I love that we've been able to work together, Tim, to create these resources that we really just hope and pray are valuable, because there's a lot of things that we've learned over the years, by mistakes that we've made or things that we wish we could have done better. And if there's anything I can teach my own kids, it's like, please don't make the mistakes I made. But also just we've been surrounded and blessed by like lots of mentors that have been around
Mm.
us. So a lot of what we share is mistakes, but a lot of it is like wisdom we've gleaned from others and from each other.
And I started a little further back back than what Brandon did, but I started actually doing live video production back in high school in the 1970s, early 1970s. I'm 68 now, and I really didn't realize that there would be part of a career field for me doing that. But I learned a lot of foundational stuff then. We had a closed circuit television studio in our high school, junior high and high school. And man, we rolled cameras around, did recordings, playback. I mean, all sorts of stuff, troubleshooting. So really lots of foundational stuff that I got to play with and tinker with. And also got into ham radio back then. So the electronics world kind of really fascinated me. Then early in my career, I worked at Texas Instruments as a software engineer, programmed robotic equipment, and then I went on to become an air traffic controller in the Dallas Fort Worth area. And both of those careers, I actually also did a lot of video. We had high speed cameras that we used for the robotic equipment. And we used to troubleshoot the mechanical stuff and things like that with it. And then also as air traffic controller, we used a lot of video for training and also for um, different evaluation things that we do with air traffic controllers. So all that was kind of cool. How God was kind of putting my tool set together. Then we went and did some ministry work in Vermont, and I came back and we started attending Gateway Church and started volunteering in the we called Tech Arts at the time. That's where I met Brandon, and he was actually doing live video directing then, which I'd done a lot of video work, but not as a live video director. So I learned a lot from Brandon back then, and we connected, and we love to teach. And so throughout our tenure at Gateway, we both were heavily involved with training the crew that we had, the volunteers that we had, and we also had an opportunity to teach at the King's University together, and we loved it. It was really, really good. We both love seeing the light bulb go off. Written a couple books and just released one called Life Unveiled, and I now am retired, whatever that really means, and live in Arkansas now with my wife Sherry, and we enjoy country drives and grandparent life. This is some of my children at the top there, and two of my grandchildren, and that's my wife and I at the bottom there. So anyhow, we love it, and it's a new season of life for us. I'm volunteering at the church that we attend here, and I just love connecting with people like Brandon does, and learning. I love to learn, and I love to share, and just all of us connect and bring the best that we can where we are with what we have. So
Tim, not only are you retired, but as per usual, this is very you. You're still serving at your church up in Arkansas as a video director. So I
yeah.
love that you're still doing it. You're doing a really great job, man. Part one, stewarding your team. Tim and I would both agree that your team is your most valuable asset. That's really one of the biggest things I learned from working at a big church for a long time. We would give tours to churches of all sizes, and they'd be like, hey, this is cool, nice gear. We could never have solid production, because we have such and such gear. And I always would say, I think we're missing the point. The point is that your people are the most important thing. And if you have low budget gear but high caliber people that are trained, people that are in unity, then you're going to be in a much better place than having the best gear and a discombobulated team. Yeah, I think one thing that really is important to remember is that even if your title is not a pastor, you are pastoring your team. And that doesn't mean, anything special. We don't have to be, liturgical. We don't have to be with a degree. It just means that, like, really our responsibility and my perspective is that you are pastoring your team on the weekend because they're not attending church, they're serving, which I think we all know is very different than just attending and being part of it and receiving. It's also being part of the service by serving. And so when you're serving on a team, you're not able to just experience it. So a lot of times, some of my best memories, Tim, of being in serving in live production is to be able to pray with our team members, to be able to do things together with them, because that way they are also pastored and taken care of. And it doesn't
Mhm.
require me to have a special degree, a special title. And I think out of my 15 years specifically working in the church, I have a handful of times where I'm like, "Hey, we had a really great production, and the video cut was great." But I have like a whole book full of experiences where we got to connect with people,
Mhm.
and I think really help pastor them, even though I never held the title.
Yeah, and also I found in you as well, Brandon, that even beyond just the weekend or the event, spiritual part of what we do and how we do it, and connecting, as we've talked before, most of us techie people, you and I haven't don't have that gene, but a lot of techie people are usually rather um, reserved or
Introverted, yeah.
introverted or whatever. And we've all seen young men and young women come in. They just kind of stand there and look and don't talk a whole bunch, and then eventually they blossom into this awesome person that just has so much to bring and so much to give, and see their encounter with God. And so that's cool. Like you said, sometimes you get some good tech stuff, but man, when you see lives change like that. And even going further is mentoring these young guys. There's some that have come along in your life and my life that we get to just sit down, and and actually do life with them, you can pour into them and help them become, all that God has for them. And there's so many that we see now have gone off and gone into college, and you see how God's using them. And so, the spiritual part is important, but I think it's even going further in that, changing and helping walk with them in their lives. So I love it. I love that we get to do that. That's where the motto we had at Gateway was, we're all about people. That really just hits the nail on the head.
It does. And I think that's the very first thing we talk about in the book, but also in this webinar, is to really drive the point home that you are a spiritual leader to your team,
Yeah.
whether you are a tech leader who's a paid full-time position, or if you're serving as a video director or a camera operator, you're still a leader. There's still people around you.
Mhm.
Bring them in and engage them. I think one of the most painful experiences for me was when I'd walk into a room and see everyone just kind of doing their own introverted thing instead of being
Yeah.
like shepherded and pastor. Like that is what we're going to be held accountable for, whether we have the title or not. And that brings us to relational is another big part of this. And Tim, you were so good at this when you were leading your video team at the campus that you worked at, but just being able to really like meet the age gap, because not only are we all mostly introverted, but there's also a variety of ages, right? There's anyone from, I've had volunteers who were 85 years old down to 5 years old, and both ends of the spectrum come with difficulties and great beautiful things as well, and everything in between. So we have all kinds of people to steward and to bring together relationally. And again, Tim, one of the hardest parts too can be having those honest conversations, because part of developing a team is not just the hurrah, let's celebrate the wins, although that's important. We also have to have the hard conversations when someone is not maybe up to par or needs more training or just isn't a good fit.
Yeah, and those conversations are the hard ones to have, and I think that's the hardest thing to learn how to walk through, because we've all had people that come in, man, their heart is there, they want to help, and they just don't have it. They can't do the tech work. It just doesn't click. And you may still find a position that they can serve and still do all the spiritual and the relational stuff with them, but sometimes you just got to sit down and just say, hey, this really isn't a good fit for you, and then maybe help them find another area that they can serve in. But I like it, the honest conversation. That's something that takes um, intentionality to learn and to grow in.
Yeah, that's right. And again, always having fun, always find time to celebrate with your team. And it's not silly, it's true. We listed the tech and creative last. That's
Mhm.
not a coincidence. That's the word I was looking for. That is very important. That is the job we might call it, the tech team or live production or tech arts. That's, in my opinion, the very last thing that's important when it comes to your team is the technical skills and the creative skills. Although that's a requirement, those first two, spiritual and relational, are first. But with the technical and creative, that's, we list it last for a reason. And again, like going back to what we talked about in the beginning, Tim, the goal is distraction free, to create an environment where people aren't distracted by the lights flickering or being too bright that I can't enter into a worship experience, or being too dark that I can't like see myself in front of me, and not being a weird environment that's just really hard to connect with. And everybody's perspective of that is different. So we're going to talk a little bit later about having a live brand. But really, one of the most important things you can do is have like a guide that says, this is how so and so church operates. This is what we're expecting. Because what Tim does when he's directing might be different than how I direct, might be different how someone, controls the lights or someone runs front of house. To have that all succinct and based on your, location is really important. And Tim, one of the things that you always excelled at and taught me a lot with is developing a training plan. So it's just really important to have a plan so that we're all ready and aware of what's expected, and to have a way to move up.
I love training. Brandon loves training, and you probably love training as well. But I've seen so many churches not train, and they do. They're really causing them a they're really putting themselves in a bind when they really don't train. And I've seen churches that will go to an extreme where you have to come every Tuesday night for camera training, and you're going to have to do a 16-week course, and then you're checked off, and now you can do the prayer meeting. And if you do good enough there, then we'll move you to the youth meeting. And that's, to me, it's a little too much. But those that come in and just say, "Hey, jump on camera," we're 30 seconds out, and they haven't even been to rehearsal. That's the far extreme.
Yeah.
And so training your team is really important. I think it puts out an expectation as far as what we expect. And like you said, Brandon, it also sets a foundation into, this is the way we frame. This is the speed of the shots we do. This is the way we cut. This is, all the various things that we do. It kind of sets a standard. Whereas you as a director might use that creative toolbox one way, I might do it a little bit different. And there'll be things that we do together, but at least the look and feel for our ministry and church that we're serving will be consistent and
Yeah.
distraction free.
Just that's exactly it. But you hit the nail on the head. Training is so important. And in so many
Mhm.
church situations I've been in, it's just like you said, on the job training. And sometimes that has to happen. Like we just don't have a choice. But it's really important to steward your team because your church has spent money on the gear, whether it's like really nice or really um used. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things that we've spent money on it, and we're stewarding the atmosphere for these people to enter into an experience with the Lord. We need to steward that well by making sure everyone's trained and aware. And that's
Mhm.
why we wrote the book. That's exactly why we wrote the book, to help train, to help guide. That's why we have Directing Academy. And there's so many other resources. Like we are just, small peas in the whole world of pods. But really, it's really important that we train teams and all that. So
All right. Let's talk about gear. Everybody loves gear.
dude, the gear. This is listed second after your team, but really we like to call this section like having the right gear, because there's not necessarily a right or a wrong. But here's what I want to drive home is having better gear does not equal better performance. Again, a lot of the times I would give a tour at a big facility at a mega church, and everyone looks at the cameras and the lights and the sound, like, well, we don't have that, so we that's an excuse, because in many cases you can do a lot with a little, right? Now, of course, there is differences in capabilities of gear, but really what I think is the most important thing is that we upgrade our team first. Don't just spend money on upgrading gear, like make sure your team is trained. It's worth investing in courses and books and trainings with like the manufacturers to get your team to a place where they're in a good spot and can actually know what they're doing, because then they can help you make informed decisions on the gear itself.
Yeah, and I've seen churches. In fact, the church I'm going to right now um, has, for example, on the video side of things, we have a couple different manufacturers of cameras that we're using. And one of the biggest things that Brandon always preached, especially to the churches that we've worked with before, is, if you can, get all the same kind of cameras. You may not be able to get them this year, but as your budget and you're adding in, try to get all the same cameras. If you can't get the same exact camera, at least get the same manufacturer, because a
Mhm.
lot of the guts to the camera are going to look a lot more similar on video. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Oh,
Yeah, I would definitely say that that, as well as really making sure that when you're choosing gear, to have know what signal flows available, to
yeah.
know what's already in place, like make your life easier, and also try to have an environment, if you can, where all the
Mhm.
gear has similar signal flows. So, for example, if you have a switcher or a router that's everything's
Yes.
SDI, best not to get HDMI cameras, because then you have to translate signal, things like that. Now, obviously this is perfect world scenario, but thinking about the signal flow that's available, and then obviously, like, we know that the future is rapidly approaching, and everything is network based. I think cameras will definitely
Mhm.
be almost all network based in the near future. So thinking future oriented whenever there are upgrades to a platform or to your control room, things like that, thinking like network oriented, and really just everything oriented towards what the future will hold. Now, not saying that we need to always buy the latest and greatest, because I'm a fan of buying like second generation, not the first generation, because even with my phone, those kinds of things are a little bit frightening to me because of the issues that they can have. But also, similar with cars, I would rather get a used Lexus than a brand new Toyota, because sometimes you can find a really good deal on better gear that's used and fits your environment more, rather than the brand new best thing I can afford now. I think that that's one of those things we can always look for deals in that sense. And another thing that Tim, you've taught me so much on is really thinking about the lifespan of gear. Gear
Mhm.
has limited lifespan, just like us humans. And a lot of times at our churches, the gear runs 24/7. And so even in like major Broadway theaters, there's dark days, a day of the week where the gear gets a Sabbath, which is pretty crazy because in the church world, a lot of people don't even listen to the Sabbath. But
Yeah.
a lot of times in these venues, like they will have a Sabbath where gear gets powered off and like rests. And I think that does a lot of good for gear. And I think that that's one thing that we miss out on a lot. So budgeting for replacement, because especially in the church world where we have events all the time, using gear all the time, gear will go out, and be thinking about the future. How much is this going to cost to repair, to maintain, having spare parts? Because when something happens, it's not usually like, oh, the cable broke. Although that does happen, it's usually like an internal component of a big piece. Like we need to have backups readily available and something ready, because when your switcher goes out, like how do you steward the atmosphere without it? Having backup plans in place are really important. So this is
Yep.
our last part, guys, and we definitely want to be respectful of your time. So we're coming up in the last
Yes.
about 10, 15 minutes of our time together. But really, this is the crux of the book that we've been discussing, and that is stewarding your atmosphere. Looks different everywhere, from a small church in the middle of Wyoming to a mega church in Los Angeles. There's differences, but how we steward it is very similar. And Tim, I'd love you to talk about one of your most passionate things is the first thing we listed before AVL is the
Mm.
communication and planning phase.
I think this is a huge thing that many, 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 many ministries either don't do or fail at. For example, in the book, we have a whole section on working, say, with the ministry team for the worship team. Say, pastor comes and says, "Hey, in 2 months we want to have this event," and they tell the worship pastor, and they're going, "Oh yeah, this is great. We wanted to say a worship night." And then they go off and they start doing their planning. And tech just hears, "Hey, it's on the calendar. We're going to do a worship night." Well, the miscommunication because the expectations on the ministry team isn't communicated to the tech team, and I think that's a huge missing piece. But even when they do connect in churches, some that do, you've got to learn, the creatives think differently than the techies. And I think what I've also seen at times in some churches, the creatives will say, "Hey, I want to do this and I want it to look like this." Or they'll even send a video. They'll send, I've seen a YouTube video sent to the tech team and said, "Oh, I love what they're doing there. Let's do that." And then the tech team needs to learn to say, "Well, what exactly do you like about that? Tell me, describe it." And they might say, "Oh, it's the color of the light. You know, forget everything else, but they just like the color." Okay, now we're getting somewhere. What's the theme? Go back and forth. Don't be afraid. And I've seen both sides kind of build a wall in that communication process. So that's critical even before you even get to the point, but it should be done far enough in advance so that now the tech leader can then go off and start planning what he needs to have done or she needs to have done for the event and have the crew they need and prepare them for anything specific. It might be highly technical, hitting all these cues. But then the last part that even more so is probably forgotten is the debrief. I think every tech team should debrief and give feedback. A lot of times we had 5 services at the campuses at Gateway, and on Saturday you'd have 2 services and 3 on Sunday. And on Saturday, a lot of times we would keep our crew after the second one, and we just kind of watch skip through the playback from the service, and we would talk about things. And the team seeing things, you go, "Hey, that movement on that camera shot was just a little bit, not what we were looking for. Here's what we want to do," and they get to see it and connect with it. And then Sunday, they bring another level of what they're doing. So debrief is important with your team, but also with ministry. When you get done, get the ministry to say, "Hey, the worship night went really good. I really kind of like what you did, but there's one thing, that you guys, I just didn't quite feel right." And get that feedback so that next time you guys can work together. So anyhow, that is a pet peeve of mine.
Tim, this is going
Okay.
to come across a little strong, but I think that when there is disunity between the tech team and the pastoral team or worship, It's like a cancer,
Mm.
because what
Yep.
ends up happening is there's a disgruntled audio person who says, every time pastor so and so comes in, he does this and makes my life hard. And then the computer
Mhm.
graphics person is like, yeah, they always bring in their notes, on the way in instead of a couple days in advance. And then they like start talking about each other, and then like it's sensed from both sides. And we are literally
Mhm.
on the same team, right? We are trying to help the people that are going to my church enter in. And so I've seen this from tiny churches to big churches. Um,
Mhm.
it's so important that we are on the same page, because a lot of times when the pastoral ministry worship team does something that you don't like, for the biggest example I know of, because I'm in the video industry, is bringing in notes too late to enter in. Like, I've seen them bring in notes as we're in the middle of worship, and the CG op is like playing out the worship slides, and the pastor's like, oh, here's my notes for the sermon, can we talk about it? And he's like, click click, next slide.
Yeah.
That is not the time to do that.
No.
I think we've all been there, but that's not a time to just get bitter and over time not have conversations. We need to have the conversations, because
Yes.
nobody understands your perspective until you share it, right? And the same way with us, like maybe the Lord inspired them with something that is like really critical for the congregation, and we want to be a part of helping that happen. But putting boundaries in place and having the conversations is so important, just as much as the rehearsals and the planning on our end, to have the relational equity, because without that, we're going to fail. So,
And two things I want to interject with that too. When I was an air traffic controller, one thing that we did is we did a lot of shadowing,
yep,
where the pilots would come in and they would plug in with us and they would see things from our perspective and what was going on. And then we got to ride in the jump seat 8 times a year and observe the pilots and talk to them, and they could ask us air traffic questions and all that stuff. So shadowing, I think, is vital, and we try to do that even in the ministry thing. We take some of the worship leaders, say, come back and sit with our CD guy, sit with the director, sit with the lighting guy, and just sit on calm and just see what goes on. And they go like, wow, I didn't realize all that happened, and then get them to come back during rehearsal. I think a lot of churches miss it on rehearsal. They have a rehearsal. Some of the tech people don't show up, but even the key people, the video director and some of those should be there to see what's going on, because we've all had it where you go into song two and it's somebody else different singing where the agenda says this is who it is, but now Sally's singing, and you never caught that because you weren't there. And the rehearsal, at least the final run through, have the worship team stand where they're supposed to, as if they're actually in a service. So all the lighting, all the camera shots, everything can be dialed in. I don't think they realize all the stuff that has to happen to make sure the wash is good and all that kind of stuff. So communicate with your worship pastor and say, look, we really need your help to make sure the last run through is just like the service, so we can make sure that we're giving all the things that we got to do.
absolutely. When it comes to audio, video, and lighting, we'll briefly cover these, but a lot of this is in the book. With audio, you're stewarding the auditory experience, and it's a big deal. Like, let's say you've been to a concert, and it just the audio makes you feel something. So it truly is an immersive auditory experience if everything works well together, like the acoustics and the volume level, right? This creates an experience that is, it brings out an emotion, even if it's very subtle. And a lot of times, there's a lot of controversy, right, about like, should worship music be emotional, because that's manipulative. My personal perspective is like, love with your spouse should be emotional, right? There should be, it's not just this like very dry thing where we just like list off, oh, I love you and you're wonderful. No, there should be an emotional connection. And I think the same with the Lord. And so that's why I think it's really important that with our music, with our worship, with the way that we create these experiences, that it nothing to be afraid of with the emotional thing. It brings the textures and dynamics. And we don't talk a lot about audio in our book, because we are not audio experts, but it's one of those things that plays a huge role in that, along with video. I mean, obviously, the functionality of having lyrics is there, but one of the biggest things that I think of when it comes to lyrics is what is called multimodal learning. And that is when you are reading something and singing and seeing it, like using multiple senses at one
Mhm.
time. you're actually learning things, and it hits you differently rather than like if we all were to sing "How Great Thou Art," we could do it right now with no lyrics. I believe all of us know that song. But when you actually read it and you're singing it, it actually it goes deeper into your brain and you comprehend it at a different level. So I think that that's one of the most amazing things about lyrics. Like it's very important when it comes to
Let me
can't.
let let me
Yeah,
interject on that too, real quick, Brandon, because I have perfect example of that. So Will I, the Hillsong song, when
yeah,
it came out, I directed it a couple times at our church and stuff, and it was a beautiful song, and I'd catch some of the words. But when we had staff chapel, uh, later on, where I got to sit there and I didn't have to think about the tech. I didn't have to think about what's going on. I saw it and I was singing the words and it
yeah.
undid me. It tore
Hmm.
my heart. Why? It's all of a sudden it's like, wow. I mean, this is so deep compared to when you're actually working and
Yeah.
going through it. And so, yeah, it's such a key element.
It's changed my life before when I'm able to like really think
Yeah,
about what are these lyrics saying.
yeah,
And the other aspects of video, capturing, I always like to say it's capturing moments and telling stories.
yeah.
So many times I see live streams where it's like, cool shot, take it, take it, take, but we're not like being intentional about why. And so I want us to think about when we're directing or running camera, we have to be intentional about the shots that we're taking and when, because they all have emotional impacts on the viewer. For example, a push like a zoom in brings you closer, it gets you that more intimate feeling. Zoom out builds energy. Like there's all kinds of things to each push, pan, pull shot that you take that's going to make a difference on the
Mhm.
viewer. And also stewarding your different audiences. A lot of times you have an iMac and a live stream. Sometimes it's the same camera cut, and that's not a bad thing, but it could be better if you think about your audience that's on the live stream has no context to the room, right? They're not in the room.
Mhm.
So taking more wide shots, doing things that really help with the pacing. But then on iMac, it can be much more simple, tighter shots to help them get closer. Like really thinking about these two different audiences as separate people. And Tim, you brought up the Bible verse that I really want to share as we end this section. And with lighting, I think it's the most noticeable aspect of audio video lighting
Mhm.
because some people will think, oh, that sounds weird if the sound is a little off. Some people like, oh, that's a weird camera shot if you take like a butt shot, like that's never happened before, right? Or the camera like tilts down. But lighting, you do a blackout at the wrong time, or like you blind
A strobe.
everybody. Yeah, like people will notice
Yeah.
that. So as much as that is funny for me to say as a video person, lighting is super noticeable, and also it affects video the most. So I think that that's a big part. And so we always say like use it tastefully. Every church is different. If your church is like a natural lighting, all lights on all the time, that's fine. Make sure that it's an experience that people can enter in with. And Hayes is your friend. There's a lot of pastors I've talked to over the days that are like, "Oh, Hayes is for rocks." Well, they call it smoke. The smoke is for the rock shows, and like, yeah, they do have that in rock shows, but there's a reason. Like, it helps you to see the light beams, helps to create
Mhm.
that atmosphere. And Tim, you asked about this Bible verse earlier. I'm going to share from
Mhm.
Revelation 4. This is the Passion Translation. I think it says this so beautifully, but I think there's so much about heaven that we just cannot even reproduce what we come close to on earth. But this is Revelation 4, starting in verse 2. Instantly I was taken into the spirit realm, and behold, I saw a heavenly throne set in place and someone seated upon it. His appearance was sparkling like crystal and glowing like carnelian gemstone. Surrounding the throne was a circle of green light, like an emerald rainbow. Encircling the great
Mhm.
throne was 24 thrones of elders in glistening white garments. It talks later in this chapter about the golden crown of victory. Here's verse 5. Pulsing from the throne were blinding flashes of lightning, crashes of thunder, and voices. Um, and then talks about torches. Like, I'm telling you, when we get to heaven, it's going to be
Mhm.
bigger and better than any of the best church services lighting I've ever seen, right? And it's nothing to be afraid of when it comes to that. Now, I think we can take this out of perspective and make a rock show. Like, it should not be about entertainment. It's always about bringing people and refocusing on
Yeah.
like the Lord and how to enter in.
Yeah. And I want to mention one other thing that we talked about just a moment ago back in the video is telling stories. I think a lot of crews, a lot of video directors get hung up on the worship portion
Hmm.
of the video. And when it comes to sermon part, they sit back and they just, cutting cameras, and they don't really, to me, the sermon part, we're still telling the story, and we're going to connect what the speaker is saying by the way we cut, the frequency, again, you can get distraction when they walk out of frame, things like that. A lot of churches now take their iPhones or their phones, and they pull social media clips out of this aspect ratio and put it in this. So you got to teach your camera operators to keep them centered. If not, pastor says, I want that clip right there, and that's thing is, and then the camera shot, the person was over here and it's unusable. So, all those little details, teaching your crew why, teach them on comm when you're talking, hey guys, keep them in the center. That could be a social media clip, on an iPhone. So they'll click with it and say, we got to keep them in the center, tracking smooth. So we're always telling the story.
That's good.
What else we got, Brandon?
For the sake of time, we're not going to cover this today,
Yeah.
but we do recommend, like I said earlier, having a live production brand. And
Yes.
it's like a brand guide, just like you'd have with, marketing, logos, fonts, typography. Having that written down on paper, audio, video, lighting, these are the expectations, because the way that Mark would mix is different. The way that I would mix is different. The way that Ren would mix. Like, we all mix differently. We all would direct video differently. How does
Mhm.
so and so church want the experience to sound, to look, to feel like when you're in there? And that's really up to you and your team. So being inspired is really important, and we talk about this a lot. We have actually a live production brand guide. It's an app that actually you enter all the information in, and it spits out a PDF to help you. It could be your entire brand guide, or to help you get started, to really think about that. So we have a product for that to help you and your church to come up with something, so it's on paper, and that way there's no offense, because it's not like I'm going to tell Tim, like, hey, I don't think we should be cutting, and Tim's like, I only think we should be dissolving, and then it's like, oh, it's you versus me. No, this is the brand of the church, and we're here to serve the vision of the church. So Tim, you want to share just briefly about the newest one from the Tim Sawtelle Nation?
Yeah, this is totally separate, but I just published this week, and it's really basically the book I wish I had when I started out in life. And I've written it for like the 35 or 40-year-old down into the teens. It covers all sorts of stuff about love, life from a Christian perspective, that I wish I had known, and all of us wish we had known. And I think it's a book. It's 444 pages, and it's has a lot of foundational stuff, and it goes through things from uh, dating, marriage, children, to finding a job, career fields, communication, financial things, like how to even open a bank account. For a young person, that's like, they don't think about, how would I do that. Lots and lots and lots of stuff in there, how to do a budget. So anyhow, lots of practical skills in there. So you can go to timsawtell.com and see more information about the book there. But if you know anybody that can be blessed, I know graduates or just young people, or if you're mentoring somebody, it's a perfect book for walking with people like that. So
It's an amazing book. I've read it, and I'm going to go through it with my son and my kids as they get older. My oldest is 12, and so I think it's a great book for anyone from like that age, like Tim said, up to even my
yeah,
age, where we're still trying to figure
this is
stuff
it.
out. But it's everything that you wish that school would teach you. Because I remember graduate high school, and you're like, I still don't know how to live life. Like, I know how to do math and I know how to write an essay, which are important, but how do you live
Yeah,
and survive? So that's awesome.
yeah.
Lastly, we want to thank everyone for joining us, whether you're watching now live or later. And please scan the QR code if you'd like. You can download all the materials that we haven't talked about or teased, but there are some discount codes, promo codes, free giveaways, things that we really want to get into your hands.